All right, Father Ted, welcome again for episode 4 of A Doctor and a Priest Walk Into a Podcast. Great name. And you are a Catholic priest who cares deeply about the world, loves to talk to individuals and get really deep into how people are experiencing the world, and then bring that up to us as a community and say, how can we take the lessons from those people, combine that with the lessons from Scripture, and make our lives a bit better. Tell us, help us lead to live better lives. Project Next is meant to do something very similar. It is a media company that is trying to bring us together, trying to get us away from the division right now that is created by our media and many of our leaders. And so, Uncle Ted, welcome. You are both my uncle and Father Ted at the same time. So sometimes I use one, sometimes use the other. How are you feeling this week? What were the readings this week?
I'm doing fine, Tim. And did you ever dream that we would be doing this years ago?
I dream big. So yeah, maybe I've had a dream or two. But no, this is great. It's basically just doing what we've done for 40 years and putting it on a podcast and on a video. So glad to be here with you.
I can't believe you're that old already, for 40 years. Anyway. So what was that question you asked me again?
How are you? How are you doing? Yeah.
I'm doing very well. I really am. I'm getting older and I'm getting forgetful of names and things like that, and making sort of mistakes, dropping things and things like that. But it's very minor. I'm very blessed to tell you. I'm really thankful for being in such good health.
So you are in good health. And let's talk about that for a second. So firstly, thank you for being vulnerable about things that you're going through. I was just had an episode of Dr. Tim before this when talking about some of my own health problems. But you are someone who is dare I say, religious about your taking care of yourself. And let me get this right. Every morning and evening, you do how many push-ups and sit-ups?
Should I tell you how many push-ups I can do?
No, but you've told me in the morning when you get up, you do push-ups every morning, even now.
Yeah, I can do a lot of them, to tell you the truth, but I won't tell you how many. But every day one day I go to the gym and I work with those terrible machines, and for about a half an hour, and then the other day I stay at home and I have to do balance exercises. Because so I have to stand on my one foot for a while, and then I walk down one foot in front of the other, and then I just do exercise every day, at least a half an hour. Yeah, meditation and exercise every day. That's sort of my guideline.
And how about naps? Is that every day?
Naps, I try to do it every day. I try to do 20 minutes, but sometimes it's actually 10 minutes. But I can actually go to sleep for 10 minutes. But
and when did that start? When did you start taking that daily nap?
Well, I think it's since I've been here at the university, probably about 7 years ago. But it really helps at the end, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. After this, I'll take a little nap.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah. It's good for your health. You're a healthy young man. So, what about this week? So, first of all, the Pope is sick. What does that mean? Do you know how sick he is? Is the church being open about that? What does it mean for? And the real question is, I wonder if you know what happens if, God forbid, the Pope were to pass away. What would that trigger? And even probably worse, what if the Pope was kind of unable to be a leader for a while and incapacitated? Like, what happens? Like, where are we taking direction from?
Well, first of all, I think the church is very open about his sickness. They give daily reports almost every couple of hours. Last I've heard, he's had a double pneumonia, and there's something wrong with his lungs. And to tell you the truth, I don't know all the technicalities, but he sits in his chair, and he seems to be a little bit better. His mind is good. Every day he calls up the Catholic Church in Gaza. Every night he calls them up and find out there. So he's been doing that. He hasn't, because he's in the hospital now. He's not giving any official business at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So regarding the if he should die, there's a definite process. The cardinals from all over the world who are, I think it's 80 years old or younger, they can vote for him. If any of you have seen the movie, the Conclave, recently, I saw that the other day. It's a story of what happens when a pope dies. It's very, it's a process which all the cardinals have to follow. They go into seclusion away from society, and they have to vote for the next pope. So that is sort of all. That'll happen rather fast.
Mm-hmm. And then what happens if he's kind of incapacitated, unable to lead?
Well, that, I don't know about that. Yeah. He might have written that down someplace. They know that, so people know that.
Maybe we can talk about that next week. So, I'm sorry to surprise you with that question, but someone just asked me, a listener just asked me that question, and I was wondering if you knew. And I think that's what they were saying, that a lot of people don't have that knowledge right now. What would happen? So. Let's do some. I would love to do some research and figure that out. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's a Jubilee year. What does that mean? It sounds awesome. It sounds amazing.
Jubilee year is just a wonderful experience. It happened from way back in the 1300s. The Pope said we have to have a Jubilee to stop and reflect what's going on. So it's a time to sort of think about the past, and this year is a jubilee of trust and hope in God. So people are encouraged to go on pilgrimages during the jubilee. In other words, to go and visit some holy place, and in that process, discover how we're called to change and what newness we're called to have. So local dioceses have churches they can go to and go on a pilgrimage, and millions of people are going to Rome. Millions of people go to Rome for the pilgrimage.
Are you going to go to Rome this year?
No, I wish I could. No, actually, I don't think I'd want to go this year. It's going to be too crowded. But yeah.
How often do you go to the Vatican? How often have you been there?
Myself, I've been there a few times. I was there for the what we call the beatification of the founder of the Marianists, Father Chaminade, in the year 2000. And I went there when I was studying in Europe way back in the 1960s. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, great. And then last week we spoke about Thomas Merton. People loved that show. It had more views than any show that we've ever done. Very interesting guy. What we call a mystic monk. So you said you wanted to talk a bit about Thomas Merton again today, some follow-up.
I do.
What's on your mind?
Well, I've been thinking a lot of what we do in the present situation especially what the president administration in Washington is doing, and how do we deal with that? And I know people are on different sides of this, and there's so many issues. And I kept saying to myself, what would Thomas Merton do in this situation? So I'd like to share. I had to talk to a very good friend today who's been studying Merton. Share a few things. We don't know exactly what he would do, but he certainly was a wise person. And as I mentioned, I think last week, he was quoted by Pope Francis when Francis talked to our Congress as kind of a model of how Americans can deal with, the serious problems we have. Yeah.
Well, that's very special to think in terms of a validator, in terms of someone kind of vouching for you, to have the Pope when they had
Mm.
the chance to speak to Congress, decided that Thomas Merton would be the person that he spoke about.
Let me tell you one thing that I didn't realize. When he had that experience in Louisville at Walnut, and what's that other street there? Walnut in Louisville.
On
There's a
Fourth and what's now Muhammad Ali
yeah,
Boulevard.
yeah. So it's got another name, Muhammad Ali. But that experience was basically that he was aware all of a sudden, he was looking around at all the people, that the glory of God is in every human being. In other words, he recognized and he called that the true self, or the unique self that everyone has, and that is the presence of God in every person. So, and he actually had a very interesting background. He went to Columbia University, and I can't say he was a playboy, but he fooled around evidently a lot, like college students tend to do. But then one day, for some reason, he went to a Catholic church near Columbia University in Manhattan, and he was moved by that. So he recognized he had to leave that one older life, and he was called to another life. And what I read about him, he wanted to bring God to people. He wanted to let people know who God was. And that's why he eventually went toward at St. Bonaventure University, and then he went into the Trappists. So he is he's a searcher all his life. How do you understand how God is working in us? So
Yeah.
We could bring that up a little bit as we talk today.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, this idea of being maybe just a college student, a wild college student, and kind of converting over, seeing the way, and then having this next moment that happened in Louisville. You're saying you're not from this area, by the way, when you say Louisville like that. You're letting the people know. But it's hard to say. It's marbles in your mouth, Louisville. And so you and then had this kind of moment of looking around and seeing people and saying, these are all God's people. Everybody has a unique self to them. And we should honor that. It's very, very special. But also a similar story to St. Ignatius. Is that right? Or of Loyola, kind of had a playboy life, as you put it, and then kind of moved over.
St. Ignatius was in the hospital, and I don't think he was a playboy necessarily, but he wasn't very interested in religion. But then he began to read novels in his time, way back in the 1500s, but then he began to read the lives of saints, and that really moved him. So he had a conversion. I mean, I look around here, the students, and some of them are just not ready to be converted. They're drinking on Saturday nights and having a great old time, far from religion. Even some of them had really wonderful religious backgrounds in their families, but when they're at the age of 18 to 22, something else is happening to them. So they're not, but I see other students. I talked to one last night who is just deeply moved about what he wants to do in his life, and how he wants to be authentically close to God. He really does wants to be authentically close to Christ, and he's searching and he loves friends where they talk about this together and they support each other. Actually, they pray a lot together, and they're growing together. So at that level, you have sort of both kind of students, but I talk to the students a lot. every one of them that I talked to, something inside of them knows that they have this something very authentic
Mhm.
that they want to develop.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
authenticity, there's something special about them, the calling, the uniqueness. It's interesting. And for people listening for the first time, Father Ted is at University of Dayton Marianist
Mm,
College over there in Ohio.
mm.
Um, Great. So, what are we supposed to? What have the readings been recently? I know you didn't have a homily this week. Normally, we talk about your homily, but you were off this Sunday and
Mm.
this weekend. But I'm sure you attended mass.
Mm.
What did you take from this weekend?
So the first reading of this week's homily was from the about Saul in the Old Testament and David. So Saul was the great king of Israel, and then the great prophet really said David should become the king. So they became rivals, and they went to war with each other, battling with each other. But the story in the reading this Sunday is about Saul. One night, some of his soldiers were able to get into, some of David's soldiers were able to get into the camp of Saul and go right to where he was sleeping very soundly. And his sword was there. And uh, they could have killed him, but somehow they informed David, and David said, "No, do not kill him." And the sword was brought back. Spear rather was brought back to David, and then later on, David screams out across the hills to Saul and says, "I cannot kill the anointed of God." So he just couldn't do that. He couldn't do that evil. And then the section from Luke is extraordinary this week, and the gospel is about do unto others what you would have them do unto you. And then it says, if you lend to those who you expect to be repaid, what does that bring you? Love your enemies and do good. Lend without expecting anything in return. Then your reward will be great. Be compassionate as God is compassionate. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, they will give to you. For the measure with which you measured will be measured back to you. So Luke is really talking to the first Christians there, and who are suffering or being persecuted. And he's saying to them, you find what is very most authentic in yourself, and you find you find that in the other person, even the one persecuting you, then you will through that you will not be yourself in hatred or in anger, but you will be in love. You will understand what love is. And basically, it's what we were saying about Merton. And the authentic, every human person has this virgin purity to them, to themselves of God. And you find that, and in finding that, you live it and you share it, no matter what happens. So that's kind of the message in the readings today. But then, what I kept thinking about is the people that might be listening to us today. How do you do that in the present situation we're in the country?
Mhm.
And I think of the what's happening with the immigrants and with the people that are losing their jobs. So it's very complicated because you have Elon Musk in there leading the whole process of eliminating all kinds of positions and budgetary expenses. And he's doing it by these people are losing their jobs and they're suffering, but the motive is, to make the government more efficient. And then you have these people that are suffering. So how do those readings apply to someone who really wants to do the right thing? And I think both sides, Americans do want to do the right thing. How do you? What is the answer? So that's what I kept thinking about, and how well we could talk about that a little bit today.
Sure. Yeah, so there's some more context there. Here in Southern Indiana, in our district, we have 8,500 federal workers that are here. And, I have the privilege of being able to speak to a lot of them, people who, I see eye to eye on a lot of things, people who we openly disagree and have great conversations. But in general, what I've found from speaking to people is that they're scared. It's a moment of fear if you have one of these jobs, whether you are doing a great job or, or someone who is, maybe not contributing as much. I think that is irrelevant to the fear. The fear is that your job won't be there tomorrow. And so that's a hard spot to be in. Those people have families. Yet, as we talked about, there is government inefficiencies and that are looking to be rooted out, as we say. And as you said, I think everyone has, or most people, let's say, have best interests of minds in a lot of ways. I'm not sure I can extend that to all of our all people who are leaders right now, but I think in general, people on the ground, at least, want others to be good and to do unto others as they would want to be done to themselves. So, please bring me through your thoughts.
So, when I was thinking of Merton, and so I'm reading this wonderful book that I mentioned last week, and it was called the Sign of Jonah, and it's really a journal that he wrote, like the first 7 or 8 years he was at the monastery. And he finds God in everything. And he has this vocation, to be a monk, which most of us don't have, but he loved it because he could be in solitude. So you read about him going out into the fields and seeing the sheep and seeing the birds and the different weather. And then he goes back and reads theology and history, and then he writes, So he is discovering, and he talks about the different monks that he's living with and the different architecture of monasteries. He loved to do that, to find pictures of them from around the world. So, and then he finds, well, what was in that architect, the way they designed a building that sort of was done by great human creativity and a sort of a beautiful work of art. He could appreciate the beauty of poetry and the different monks that he lived with and his friends. And so God is in everything. And the book that I read when I was in high school that I think I mentioned, Seven Storey Mountain, I understand it's based on the Divine Comedy, which by Dante in the Middle Ages. And Dante, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard about this, that book is based on overcoming the 7 deadly sins, that we have: pride and anger and anxiety and greed and lust and envy and gluttony and wrath and sloth. So people struggle in their life to overcome those evils. But it's a divine comedy in the sense that as you're doing it, you're discovering the beauty of God, And this book that he wrote that became so popular, Merton, Seven Storey Mountain, he discovered that in his life, overcoming those kind of negative parts of life. And then he discovered the godlike in him and the godlike in all of us. So I kept saying, that's what we have to do in our situation in the country. You take someone like President Trump, he has very, very lot of clever parts of him, like he's relational. He speaks whatever he wants to speak. He's not afraid to speak. Does he tell the truth? No, he tells us a lot of things that aren't true, which is the negative side. But he also, speaks. He's not afraid to do that. So that part of him is very healthy, And I think we citizens, we have to get over that fear or hesitancy to investigate. Well, what do I to speak out? Because as we see, every one of us has this God in us, and don't hide it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to. And you take some commentators. Rogan, is there one called Rogan or somebody like that?
Joe Rogan. Yep.
Joe Rogan. So I don't know much about him, but he's just very good at communicating, right?
He's excellent. Yep.
Yeah. So
reaching new audiences and bringing them into the political sphere.
So we need more people like that. I understand there's a black sports writer. His name is Stephen A. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I just heard about him yesterday, but they say he's very, very good
communicator. Yeah,
for the Democrats. He could be good for the day. Some say he might be even a good president because he's such a good communicator. So I don't know, but not to be afraid to speak out. But the skill of it is to tell the truth and to find the right solutions. So are we going to, solve the government problems by eliminating so many programs and so many people losing jobs? That kind of process is innately wrong, because it doesn't respect people. And that's what we're doing to the immigrants or the migrants, because they're considered the lowest in the country. A lot of the leaders of the country don't want them around. But the contrary is, each one of those persons has this uniqueness and quality that you want to bring out.
Mm-hmm.
By relating with that person, you grow with each other. So the dynamic has to be what's in that gospel today. You love the person. You even though you're suffering, you still bring out the best of the person. That's what good relationships are.
Yeah. How do you do the hard things with love? How do you do the hard things that may need to get done, or that you have conviction needs to be done, and do that with a way of loving everybody? That's a hard question, and something that we can all model right now.
Mm-hmm. Can I read you a parable?
Certainly, yeah.
So this is a parable that was told by I read in a book, by a spiritual book, And this is it. It's a little bit, it's about a paragraph. So it's very profound, and it's very sort of difficult maybe to understand. It goes like this. This is a French parable. A widowed mother had an only son whom she cherished. Her tireless loving care was repaid by ingratitude, by this son, ingratitude. Heartless wretch that he was, heedless of her needs, time and time again, he left her, only to return when his pockets were empty and he was hungry. Each time, she would welcome him and supply his needs at cost to herself. Eventually, his selfish greed had stripped her of everything she had, and on his return, then finding her unable to give her anything that he wanted, he was furious, and in anger tore out her heart from her, and in sheer contempt threw it on the ground. As he was at the door, he fell over the heart, and the heart said, "Have you hurt yourself, my son?" So that's a parable. So the writer,
I didn't expect that the ending there. So
the writer is trying to say that the love of God is so powerful that it is like, that's just a story or a parable. That's how deep the love of God is. And that's the way when we try to solve problems in the country, we don't do it out of revenge or anger or hatred or even the way we talk about each other. We find ways to appreciate each other, deeply appreciate. And that's the basis for a very good society. Mm-hmm. But I think it takes you and me and all of us to develop that part of ourselves that we really do dialogue and listen to each other. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's what Pope Francis said about this Jubilee year. The Jubilee year is to be a year of hope. And in hope, you talk to each other and you bring the best out of each other, you dialogue with each other. So,
yeah. So, I mean, it's the dialogue is something that we're striving for right now. It's something that I'm speaking quite loudly about, in this moment, again, where we have a lot of media, especially, and then parroting of that media and individuals and leaders who are just yelling about themselves, yelling about their own views, and not necessarily in good faith giving views in such a way that it's about learning. Like you said, Trump's a great communicator. You mentioned some other great communicators who have different views. Being someone who can communicate and put out your views, but doing so in a way that invites conversation and then opens your mind to having empathy and love for someone else, that their views, that something that they say can educate you as well. And so those two things don't have to be different, right? We can say what we believe. We can communicate to that world, not be scared to, mince words or be political or try to say the right thing to change a situation, which is, a lot of what current day politics and politics in general are about. We can still say things that are truthful to ourselves, but do so in a loving way that means, I want that to help you, but I also want you to help me. Mm-hmm. And having that hope that there's a better way that we can move forward between various viewpoints just relates into what this whole year is about here in the Catholic Church.
So when you were saying that, what does that feel like in you to have that kind of a disposition, that kind of an attitude or disposition?
Well,
Kind of.
it goes in the face of many of the political leaders I have to work with, right? I'm told every day to make sure I'm told for this podcast right here, make sure that you say the right things, make sure that you don't overstep what you're saying. Don't,
Mhm.
call people out in various ways. And I think you get those views, and I think what is missing in those views, in which you hear what they're saying and you incorporate it into yourself, but what's missing out, it's not about calling out, it's about calling in. It's about talking to people about what's going on and say, hey, come into this way of being able to be conversive, to be able to be learning, to be able to, myself as a moderate, left of center person, saying, okay, what can I learn? And should I go more to the left? Should I go more to the right on this?
Mhm.
Because I'm having conversations with people, and that and and those conversations, when it's done with political leaders, you get a much different
Mhm.
final decision that if you're talking to someone when you're knocking on their door, when you're talking on the calling, or you're talking to someone at a fair or at a parade, and you hear what they really believe, what's going on in their life, and what they need. You get out of these conversations of pressure to do things one way or another, and you can
Mhm.
be so much more authentic and hear stories and try to bring love into that conversation. So that's what it makes me feel like, is this dichotomy of things being said to me by
Mhm.
the consulting political class versus the things being said to me
Mhm.
and that I learn on the ground.
Well, it's as you were talking, I know it takes an awful lot of prudence. We actually had a demonstration here at the university of the students for in favor of immigration. Some of the students really spoke well. One of them, about he's suffering, his parents are suffering, and then they wanted us to speak. So I said, "Well, should I say anything?" And I finally have said, "Well, I better think about what I'm going to say, but it's important to say something."
Hmm.
So I did, but you have to think about it. But yeah,
You
what
think
you're
about what
saying,
you believe, right? What you believe and how you're going
right?
to be
Hmm.
able to communicate that in such a way that your
Hmm.
your words aren't misconstrued, or it's not even
Hmm.
that your words are misconstrued, that you don't say something that you don't actually believe or give the full story, right? It is good to be prepared and not just shoot off the cuff.
Sure, yeah. And this man like Thomas Merton, because he was in a monastery and he could reflect and understand, who were the great writers that wrote, these fundamental truths and beautiful stories, powerful stories. That I think that's what I think our task is, trying to do it the right way, but it does take this willingness to not be afraid, not let fear control you. Rather than let fear control me when I speak, I have to say, well, no, what is going on in me that I know to be true, and I'm going to say it.
You're reminding me of last night. I was at a meeting, and Uncle Ted, I'll tell you all about it, and I'll do it. And we're going to talk about it on a different podcast that we have called Get the Word Out. We're having a whole bunch of problems with our fire districts here in Clark County in southern
Mhm.
Indiana. Not for this conversation, but the point of that is that's where I was. And there is a woman who I know and desire to get to know more, and she me, who is retired school teacher, Catholic school teacher, a Catholic who said that she wanted to volunteer. And I had been talking and volunteer for, my campaign. And she had said in the past, um, you know, hadn't communicated that, and now had communicated that. But she said, I can't get up in front of a crowd like you just did and talk to people. That's not me. I can't go out there. She doesn't really want to knock doors and have these conversations, right? And it's not because she doesn't want to say or express what she believes. It's just that this idea of talking this way is not where she feels comfortable. She has other skills. She has other ways. So I want to
Mhm.
say that communicating what you believe, being open and bringing love to other people doesn't only have to be through, you know, being loud about with your words. It could
Mhm.
be simply listening. It could be writing. It could be, embracing with someone that you love. It could be done through your performance in sports or in athletics or music or whatever it might be. It could be for volunteering and using your skills as a accountant in the background to make sure the books are cleaned. Like you you don't it's not only about the word. I think word
Mhm.
is symbolic of gesture in other communications as well.
Last night I had a long talk with a group that I talk with on Tuesday nights, and we talked about manhood. And so many writers are now writing about you have to have men have to claim their manhood, and all kinds of different kinds of things, like these cage fightings are happening where there's sort of a violent type of sports. But as we talked about it, um, and then some people were saying, well, women are taking over. Some men are saying, well, women are Me Too movement, and you have to resist that. But when you really think about what does it mean to be a man, for example, it is to um, be wise and strong at the same time. It's uh, it's like Tom Cruise and Top Gun. You know, you have to. What is the model for a good kind of a man? It's not someone who dominates or controls. Well, same thing for a woman. What is the authentic of a woman? Not someone who's controlled by a man or controlled, pushed down by society with her talents, but you know, uses them in the way she knows is correct to use it. So, but everybody, we all have these different talents, as you were saying, and we have to find out how do we use them in the correct way. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, let's wrap this up, Uncle Ted, Father Ted. You've spoken about Top Gun and Tom Cruise today. You've spoken about the Pope, Thomas Merton. About you've used the word Playboy, and you're making just this open, honest way of talking and communicating to people. I think it's so endearing. I think people love it.
Mhm.
Again, the last episode that we did was overwhelmingly watched by thousands of people who are newcomers to our podcast
Mhm.
and to the channels at Project Next Media. And so your authenticity, your beliefs, your ways of um, talking about where this odd place in our current society about kind of making sure that we're respecting people on all sides of an issue.
Mhm.
I say odd because it's not the norm; it's where we should be going toward. But you're so good at it, and it comes from
Mhm.
such a place of authenticity. There's nothing in it for you to, there's no like secondary gain that you get from doing that. You're not getting paid for this, of any way.
Mhm.
And so just that truth, that honesty, is very much appreciated, not only by me, but by the people listening and watching.
Well, it's great to be with you, Tim. And I often think of your son, Cassidy Cass. What a what a wonderful relationship you have with him. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
we played with a new Lightning McQueen pillow that he had this morning. He's I don't know if you know this, but he's sleeping in his big boy bed, which is we expect him to want to come out of the crib so soon. So we put a mattress on the floor, and we got him this Lightning McQueen, and he calls him Light Man McQueen, and just had fun and wrestled a little bit before I had to leave the house at 9 a.m. this morning. So he's great. He's healthy. He's happy, and yeah, I learn stuff from him every day.
yeah, isn't that the whole country should be like that? We'll grow like that, like a child.
Yeah, we can all be more more innocent. That would be wonderful. But all right, thank you so much again. Super appreciate everything that you're doing for people here in Ohio. in our area, throughout the Midwest, throughout the country. You're a leader, and we appreciate you. Thanks.
So long, everybody. Thanks, Tim.
Goodbye.